Hey everyone, happy Monday again. We've made another week. Congratulations, everyone. Very proud of everyone. Uh, so this week, this verse accidentally kind of, I think, lines up with uh, Pastor Wade's sermon yesterday. Kind of on the idea of how we can feel like we're equipped for something, but that's not what God intended us. Like when Wade was talking about all the work he put into being a professional musician. Uh, but that's not what God called him to do. So even though he kind of had this his talent and this ability and this effort he'd put in, that's not ultimately what God called him to do. And God equipped him for what he called him to do. So this takes us all the way back into the Old Testament in First Samuel. So it's only 4 verses, right? 18, 12, 5 verses. Uh, but it's kind of a good healthy chunk. But so First Samuel chapter 15, verse 18 to 22. So I guess for some context for it. So Samuel the prophet has been talking to Saul about kind of what God is intending, what God's mission is in this moment, and it's the Amalekites. I think that sounds like I'm pronouncing it right. But so it's these people that have just done, I guess, bad things against God. So God has commanded Saul to just wipe them out. That's all the people, all their possessions, the ox, the sheep, all these different things. Don't take like any kind of spoils of war. Just get rid of the people. Um, and Saul interprets that in a way that he wants to. So I'll read the verse. So starting at verse 18. And the Lord's, this is Samuel talking to Saul. And the Lord sent you on a mission and said, go, devote to destruction the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are consumed. Why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord? Why did you pounce on the spoil and do what was evil in the sight of the Lord? And Saul said to Samuel, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord. I have gone on the mission on which the Lord sent me. I've also brought Agag, the king of Amalek, the Amalekites, and I have devoted the Amalekites to destruction. But the people took the spoil, sheep, oxen, the best of things that were devoted for destruction, and kept them to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal. And Samuel said, has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to listen than the fat of rams. So, uh, I could do more research, but I I kind of glean that Saul and kind of like his upbringing and just kind of like the kind of standard of the Israelites at the time was to sacrifice to God. We see in the New Testament, especially in Jesus' time, uh, the Israelites become very like legalistic. Of God says like sacrificing to cover sin, so it's kind of like a 1 + 1 = 2 easy formula. So he's kind of like locked in this. So when God comes in and tells Saul, "Hey, do this thing for me," uh, I'm not looking for a sacrifice. I'm looking for that you do this and just get rid of everything. Saul then just kind of gets in his mind that how he's been prepared mentally, how he's interpreted things, and how he kind of feels in his heart uh, how to do something is better than how specifically God is calling him to do that thing. So, like in the entire chapter of chapter 15, there's this kind of big back and forth of Saul and Samuel, where Saul keeps saying like, "Oh, like, but I did the mission. I got rid of the Amalekites. We kept these things for a sacrifice, but I got rid of the Amalekites." And Samuel will come back with, "That's not what God said to do. He said get rid of everything." And it's just like, with all that, Saul still just not understanding of what it meant. So then this is towards the end of kind of that back and forth, where Samuel then eventually has that the line at verse 22 of, "Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice; to listen is better than the fat of rams." And kind of tying into what Pastor Wade said, of, like we have these things kind of set up in our mind, these boxes that we want to put how we worship God, how we process His will, how we try and do His will. But that's not what God's calling us for. He's calling us to see His will and what He's calling us to do, and do just that. Not try and reinterpret it into our lives. God isn't looking for us to take Him and mold Him into our personal box. He's taken us and, if anything, put us into His box. He's the one that provides. We are not the ones that are providing what... It can be hard, I guess, to think of. We're not the ones providing our talents. God is the one providing the talents to us, which I guess can be confusing. But it's just important to understand that it can be easy to, how to phrase it, just important that when God calls us to do something, and when God gives us instructions, specific instructions, that we don't wander from that. That we don't think, oh, God said this, but He meant this. I feel like He meant for this to happen. Like with Saul, he said, let's destroy everything. But I know that God likes sacrifices. So let's actually keep some of the things and sacrifice it to Him. And we'll surprise Him. The God who knows literally everything. Even the things that haven't happened yet. Let's surprise Him. It's important to just kind of focus on what God says. And don't get caught up in how we want to interpret what God says. God's pretty clear in most things. So, I would encourage everyone to maybe kind of think of things in their lives. I know, from a young age, I was kind of always told, if you have a talent, that's explicitly there to, I don't want to make it sound wrong, to glorify God. And it's not that it's not true, but with Pastor Wade as an example of, he was and is a talented musician. And in times when God calls for that, he can step in. I remember there was a time when we were without a worship pastor, and Pastor Wade was able to step in and just kind of keep the choir, keep the boat going until we brought Daniel in. And that was something that, if he didn't have the background that he had, he wouldn't have been able to do. But that time of helping the choir is not his purpose in life. His purpose was teaching, and it was just that kind of a sense of all this work you've done is not in vain, but what I have put on your heart, what I have given you the ability to do, is what's actually important. So I encourage all of us to think on what we see God calling us to do and what we think God is calling us to do, and just pray on those and find where we are trying to control it in our hearts and where God is trying to lead us.